Hi there, everybody, and welcome. I'm Armin Brott with the Men's Health Network, and we're a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to reach men and boys and their families where they live, work, play, and pray with health awareness and disease prevention messages and tools, screening programs, educational materials, advocacy opportunities, and patient navigation. And today's webinar, which is on prostate cancer, breast cancer, and the patient experience, is part of our efforts. Before we get started, I want to give some general shout outs and thank yous. Thanks to the Congressional Men's Health Caucus for making the event possible today. And also want to thank the following organizations: the National Cancer Institute Center for Cancer Research, the CDC Division of Cancer Prevention and Control, American Urological Association, Breast Cancer Portrait Project, Fans for the Cure, Healthy Women, and Zero, the End of Prostate Cancer. As some of you may know, today is the last day of Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, and it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month starts tomorrow on October 1st. A few years ago, I was writing an article in which I interviewed both prostate cancer and breast cancer survivors, and I was struck by, when I was talking to both men and women, at the similarities in their stories, both how they, as patients, reacted to their diagnoses, but also how their families and their loved ones responded and supported them, which helped them significantly in their fight against these two diseases. In today's webinar, we've got some wonderful speakers who have powerful, engaging stories that highlight the journeys that people make when they're fighting both breast and prostate cancers, as well as the critical role played by significant others as patients in their families or their loved ones go through that journey. Because our time today is short and limited, I don't want to use a lot of it by reading long intros of our speakers, and despite the fact that their intros or their bios are very interesting. So we've put links to their bios and resources about the organizations I mentioned at the very top of this chat. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's in the description. Our first speaker is Congressman Donald M. Payne, Jr., who's the Democratic congressman representing New Jersey's 10th Congressional District. In addition to all the other great work Congressman Payne does in Congress on health issues and other issues, he's the chair of the Bipartisan Congressional Men's Health Caucus, which includes the Prostate Cancer Task Force. Congressman Payne, I want to thank you again thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you again. You were on a webinar we did a few months back.
Yes, well, good morning, and thank you for having me. Let me just say that it's a real honor to be here for this prostate cancer, breast cancer event, the patient experience event. Today, we will hear from patients who have dealt with these difficulties of prostate and breast cancer. It is important to have these events to raise more awareness of these two cancers because they are so deadly. Prostate cancer is the second leading cause of cancer deaths in men. This year, almost 250,000 American men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer. And there will be more than 34,000 of them that will pass away from this disease. 1 in every 8 American men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer during his lifetime. And for women, breast cancer is just as deadly. Overall, breast cancer is the second leading cause of cancer deaths for them, as prostate is for men. This year, more than 280,000 American women will be diagnosed with breast cancer, and more than 43,000 of them will pass away from this tragic disease. Overall, 1 in every 39 American women will die from breast cancer. But these numbers do not have to be so tragic. Men and women can survive from prostate and breast cancer if they can catch it early enough. For prostate cancer, the 5-year survival rate is nearly 100% if detected early. For breast cancer, the 5-year survival rate is 99% for early detection. But the key to early detection is cancer screenings. We need to increase the awareness so we can get more people screened and treated for these deadly diseases. Screenings can be the difference between a cancer victim and a cancer survivor. I look forward to hearing the stories today from the brave men and women who have survived their fight with cancer. They are the true heroes of this battle and serve as inspiration and examples to all Americans. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this briefing.
Congressman Payne, thank you very much for the introductory remarks. It's so wonderful to hear that Congress is up on these things and is paying attention. And I know that at Men's Health Network, we spent a lot of time putting together the figures and the statistics, and it's great to see that they're landing on someone's desk who is really interested in moving these issues forward. I know you've got a busy schedule today, but if you're able to stay, or somebody from your office is able to stay, it would be great to have you. Let me introduce our next speaker, who is Patrick Scheffler. Patrick is, as you'll hear him talk, he's really one of the most positive, optimistic guys you could ever hope to meet. He's also a prostate cancer survivor, and you'd think that that would diminish somebody's optimism, but it really hasn't in Patrick's cases. It may have actually increased it. His story illustrates not only the importance of becoming your own advocate, which is incredibly important, as you'll say, but also how critical it is to maintain a positive attitude and to have the support of family and loved ones. It's a wonderful story that illustrates all the points that we're trying to make. Patrick, where are you? There you are. Okay. Tell us a little bit about the diagnosis that you had and how it came up. I think you were telling me the other day when we spoke that your PSA was at about 4 for a while, and then all of a sudden it skyrocketed to somewhere in the 30s.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone for being here. But yeah, it's very unique. My scenario is very unique where one of my sons owns an insurance and financial services business. So I was helping him hit a bonus, ironically, to hit a bonus for some more selling more life insurance, which I didn't really need, but I went for an exam, right? And the poor guy called me back and said, listen, you got the PSA was really elevated, but I think it was just a mistake. You need to go get it redone. And so, because a year earlier it was below 4, and so it was 37 on this insurance test. And so I went to my doctor, obviously, and it came back the same thing. And so that's sort of how I found out, and that's where the journey started.
And you told me that you began to do research, and this is talking about the point about being your own advocate. You started doing research into what do people do with prostate cancer, and you found somebody in the local area that you thought was a good match. And the way you were describing it to me yesterday, you were saying that it was really that there were some conflicts, that they were telling you one thing and you were finding something else, and you were pushing. And that's I think something that we need to hear. How did that work?
Yeah, I think the big one, there's multiple lessons here that I've learned, but I think one of the biggest ones is that you have to be your own advocate, right? I mean, doctors are amazing, and the treatments are amazing, and the progression of awareness is so much better now than it was even a few years ago, let alone 10 and 20 years ago. Having said that, though, you have to really be your own advocate. And as we spoke about, I'm just very positive. So after the initial shock, I really started doing my own advocacy and research. And I didn't know who to reach out to. I didn't know, like most men, which is part of the problem, didn't even know what prostate cancer was or what a prostate was, to be honest with you. So I didn't really know what to do. So I Googled, and the first person I saw with 5 stars I went to meet with. And like you said, there were some conflicts, right? They read the MRIs wrong after I went and got an MRI. They didn't want me to get an MRI until after the biopsy, which could be scheduled for a few weeks. And rather than waiting for what they wanted me to do, I went and got an MRI on my own because of the elevated PSA and what I was learning about it. And there were conflicts there. So I went again after I met with the initial person that I had met with. And I went everywhere. I talked to MD Anderson. I've got a friend who's a judge who used the Mayo Clinic, had surgery there. Talked to him and his doctor. I went to USC. I looked all over the place, and lo and behold, I was very blessed and lucky that there was a clinical trial that my now personal oncologist co-wrote while at MD Anderson. While she was at Dana-Farber. So the timing was really perfect, but the short of a long story is I got on this clinical trial that was amazing. But had I done standard of care with my stage 3 diagnosis, I would have literally had surgery and radiation, and it would have been a whole different, I'd be in a whole different place now probably than I am. So advocacy, I think, is absolutely essential in this fight.
But this is, again, for everybody who's listening, it's important to understand that you didn't do all this on your own, right? I mean, you didn't just drop into a clinical trial all by yourself, and you had people that you were talking to help you make sense of the information that you're getting and being bombarded with all sorts of stuff. How did that work? What were the conversations like with your family?
So, it's amazing because, again, I'm just a very blessed person, and my family is sort of the heart of that whole, the support universe. And I think that is very important. I think that women have done a really good job with breast cancer awareness because they generally like to talk about things where men generally don't. And I think that it's very important that men, sort of talk about this kind of stuff. But again, for me, it was easy because I've got the kind of family that's super supportive. And so, it's the center of that universe. And from that, I started talking to other people. And, what happened was that, again, a long story short, we're limited on time here. My family put together an amazing event, a surprise to me. My daughter and my wife put together a secret Facebook group where on one day in the middle of summer, we were playing Dad years ago. My son's now playing it with me. They were all wearing these T-shirts that says Scheffler Strong on the back and Positive Vibes on the front. And we went to a local lunch place after the game, and they said, open up Facebook. And literally thousands of people from all over the world were wearing these shirts and making these comments about supporting me. And so that's completely, I think it's super important that you have support around you. In Zero Prostate Cancer, we did a couple of walks and raised money for them. And they were just, again, it's just that whole community in terms of helping support. And I think that's a huge part of this is a positive mindset and surrounding yourself with positive people and having support around you and being open about it.
One of the things I mentioned the article that I did a couple of years ago about breast cancer and prostate cancer. And what I heard from both men and women was that when the doctor said the word cancer to them, they stopped listening. They basically didn't hear anything after that. And so it was so important to have somebody with them who could take notes and could help them to think a little bit more clearly through these things. You told me that you had a sense that you had cancer before you actually heard the word, but what was it like to actually get the diagnosis?
Well, that's a great point. And so, like I said, I think mine was a little different in that I was super proactive. So through the MRI and talking to the person that took the MRI and the radiologist and these other people, I sort of surmised that I had cancer before I was ever told. But having said that, though, you're completely right. So when I went to the appointments after, I was in shock and trying to figure out what to do, my wife, Karen, we'd leave the appointment and I'd say, what did they say? And she was there for me to be able to literally write down and remember exactly what it was that they talked about, because especially early on, right, you become a pro at it with experience like anything else. But early on, I'd go to these appointments and I'd leave and say, what they just say, after 20 minutes. And so, again, I think that it's just paramount that you have support from all the way through this thing. And so for me, it was support in all different directions, including and especially, with my wife being there for me 24/7, literally through the entire thing. And if she wasn't, I wouldn't have known I would have lost 2/3 of what they told me early on, especially.
One of the things I've wondered about this a lot, I've been fortunate enough not to have dealt with prostate cancer on my own. My dad had it and is fortunately alive and well. But the fact is, as Congressman Payne mentioned in his remarks, a lot of people die from prostate cancer and a lot of people die from breast cancer. And so you can be optimistic about it and your family can be optimistic about it and have positive vibes, but at some point you've got to face the reality, right? That there is a chance that this could go wrong. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I don't think that positive vibes and positive energy and looking at things in it from a positive perspective means not being realistic, right? So I think that coincides with being very proactive and your own advocate, because you really have to, while being positive, also do what you need to do in order to, sort of beat the beast, if you will. whether it's breast cancer or prostate cancer or any cancer that you're going through. And so you're right. And I think part of being realistic is being proactive and educating yourself and being involved and looking at all your options and keeping up to date on things and watching things like what we're doing right now and being involved in them, because it's an evolution. There's always new treatments and there's always evolution inside of the space. So I think being positive is amazing and it's part of it, but it's just one piece of it. It's not going to cure you, but it's going to help you along the way in terms of your mindset. But you're right, you have to be totally realistic with it at the same time and prepare as you go along.
So what are you and your family doing as you move forward with your journey?
So the biggest thing we're doing is advocating for early detection and then helping people that have been detected with something, how to deal with it, how to cope with it, both mentally and in terms of proactively seeking out the proper treatment for them, and doing as much as we can to be involved with, these organizations and doing things like this to help sort of just spread awareness. Because I think, again, I go back to breast cancer and women and what an amazing job that they've done, women collectively, with the breast cancer awareness, and everyone knows what pink stands for, right? Not everyone knows what light blue stands for in terms of the cancer community. And so we're huge advocates for awareness of what prostate cancer is, early detection, mindset going through it, and proactively advocating for yourself once you have it.
Patrick, thank you very much. Please stick around with us. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions in the Q&A. I want to bring up our next speaker, who is Reginald Hollywood Thompson. And Hollywood, take yourself off mute. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, you're there, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, you're going to see in just a second. Hollywood is a unique character. He's also a 2-time prostate cancer survivor and really an all-around inspiring kind of guy. Hollywood, thanks for joining us. You're in Tennessee.
Yes.
Tell us about your first diagnosis.
Well, first I want to say this: all glory go to God, my wife, and my doctor. Well, I'm the type of guy that go to the doctor all the time. Anything, I'm gonna go to the doctor. Well, I was going and I found out at first I had an enlarged prostate for several years. And she finally had me to go to another doctor. And he was telling me about my prostate. He told me my prostate was the size of an 80-year-old man. I was in my early 50s then. I said, man, God. So then, checking my PSA numbers, and it was in the 3s, and it started going up. And he told me I was on the fence, and I couldn't fall off that fence. I had to stay at that area right there. Well, I fell off the fence, so he sent me for a biopsy. That's when it was determined that it was cancer. But let me get back to this part here. The reason I was able to find out, because I went to the doctor. I had early detection. I was not scared of what this doctor had to do to me to find out. That's the problem with men. We don't want to go through certain programs to find out. And until that ends, there's going to be a lot of more sick people. All you got to do is go to the doctor. You know your status as a man. That doctor needs to use that finger. That's what he got to do. That's going to detect your size of your prostate, and they're going to find out if it's cancer through your blood. You got to do these things. You got to do these things all the time, because cancer, it moves slow, but when it moves, it moves. Well, all of a sudden, now I got to have a biopsy. So when I had this biopsy, a few weeks later, I went to the doctor, back to my doctor, and he walked in, he said, I got good news and I got bad news. I said, oh my God. Now, you finna give me some bad news, and my mama ain't living now to be there with me. Now I'm scared. He said, the bad news is cancer. when he said that, you talking about some crying? Oh my God. I done stopped breathing. I'm crying so hard. And my wife squares my hand. And when my wife squares my hand, it was over. I was all right then. Well, I discussed the different treatments I could have, this and that. And I asked him, which one would he do? He said, well, Reginald, I can't tell you that. I said, yes, you can. He said, well, if I did it for myself, I would go this route. So I went home and I thought about it. I called him back. I said, well, let you take it out. Well, through the process of this, getting in my mind, I'm messed up. So I called a friend of mine, I called Preacher. I told him about it. He said, Hollywood, man, do you realize there's a reason you're going through this? I said, what? He says, a reason you're going through this. I said, what you mean there's a reason? He said, God put you this in this for you. I said, what you mean? Well, I am a DJ on the motorcycle set. Been doing it for 40 years. And he said, don't nobody listen at nobody on the set, but everybody listen at you. So I thought about that. I went to work one night. When I said I was jamming so hard. Man, look here. Whew. I was jamming hard. I had my program set what I was gonna do. I was jamming hard. I was jamming so hard, I knew I was best by that, better than the rest. I was bossing them golf, making water run off. I was cutting up. Then all of a sudden, I just stopped the music. Stopped the music. Everybody looked up at me. I said, I need to talk to y'all. I said, every man in here, 50 years old, raise your hand. I said, now every man over 50, raise your hand. Then I said, how many men that had their prostate checked? Out of this whole group of people, I heard about 2 voices. I have. I said, man, y'all got to get the prostate checked. And the first thing I heard, this was the first thing I heard. Out of all these people, I heard this here. Ain't nobody touching me with their finger. And I told him, I said, man, you stupid. I don't know who he is today. I said, you stupid. I said, man, that will save your life. That will save your life. Man, I had some of my old friends that I've been around when we was in our 20s. Man, they crying. I said, hold up, y'all, hold up. I caught this early, and I'm gonna beat this. By the grace of God, I'm gonna beat this. Well, as of today, as I sit here, the last time, I think it was 10, right? 15, I have 15 of my friends that was checked and had prostate cancer. And out of them 15, they's doing great, great. Now, I'm gonna shift and tell you something else. When we have prostate cancer surgery and they tell us that we good, we feel that we are through with all of that. No, you're not. They told me twice about my PSA and it was 1.0 twice. So I'm thinking 1.0, I'm good. Several years, I'm good, I'm good. And my doctor gave me a physical and told me, asked when the last time you had your prostate checked? I said, man, I ain't got no prostate. I ain't got to get my check. He said, Ray, your PSA numbers is, I said, how my PSA numbers? I go back to my doctor. Well, it come back, it come back. I took treatment for 7 weeks, 5 days a week. I'm second time, cancer free, praise God. But men, you got to wake up.
Yeah.
And sometimes we as men need a little push. So if there's any ladies out there listening at this, listening, sometimes we as men need a push. And that push is our better half. Ladies.
So Hollywood, I often, you're absolutely right about everything that you're saying. I'm just listening to it so closely. There are a couple things I just want to mention as long as you're giving people positive messages. You were saying men over 50, but for Black men in particular, over 40, they really need to be checked, because Black men have got worse outcomes for prostate cancer than other racial groups, is one thing. And also just the importance of the family. You mentioned your wife being there for you and supporting you. Is that something that you said you had 15 friends who had prostate cancer also? Are they also telling you that they're getting support from family?
Yes. You know, and you know, they, you know, these friends of mine, you know, they telling me about how they wipe this and how they wipe that, and how they, you know. But now I'm gonna tell you something. I've experienced, there was only one, that him and his wife is now divorced because of this. Well, that right there lets you know, right there, this was not the woman for you. But by the grace of God, I was in his corner, other friends was in his corner, he had sisters in his corner. So, you know, everything worked out real good. But like I say, man, and it's just like with me, with my job, I'm gonna tell y'all this story. You know, I am a salesman for home juice. I sell Mr. Pure juice, Fago juice, and Rip It energy drink. So I'm a salesman. I'm in different locations all the time. Well, the question was asked to me, do you think it's appropriate for you to have all that hair on your face and a sales? I said, y'all don't pay me to sell hair. Y'all pay me to sell juice. So they kept on. I told them there's a reason. This is not a fashion statement. There's a reason for my beard. My beard is on my face for those who have lost the struggle and those who are still in the struggle of prostate cancer. And the guy that said something to me about that said, well, let it grow to the ground, because my daddy died with prostate cancer. So, you know, I got a lot of positive stuff I can talk about. And then, you know, I got a lot of negative. And I hope I don't take too much of your time. But
well,
I just,
you know, I just want to make sure, I want to get back to you, but I want to go to our next speaker though, but please stay around, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people are going to have questions for you. I'll have questions for you too, but I just want to make sure we can get, because Dr. Dahut is going to be joining us. So thank you so much. What a story. Dr. William Dahut is our next speaker. He's the scientific director for clinical research for the National Cancer Institute. And he has spent literally years researching and developing strategies for treating prostate cancers, and is going to give us a little bit of a different perspective. We've been hearing from patients, folks who have had prostate cancer and their specific experiences, but Dr. Dahut's got a little bit more on the data side for us. Please go right ahead, Dr. Dahut.
Thank you, Armin. And I really want to thank our patients for coming out today, because it's really drives home why we do what we do. And again, I'd like to thank the Congressman for expressing his support. I want to my talk will be a little bit different. I want to talk a little bit about the research that we're doing. And it's always struck me that patients really do want to hear what's going on, and that there's incredible intelligence and interest in really the science and what we're trying to do impact on our patients. Next slide. So I'm part of the National Cancer Institute, and we are one of the many centers of institutes which are part of the National Institutes of Health. And I'm in the intramural portion of that. So I'm part where the patients are taken care of on the Bethesda campus. And so some of you may not know, all the medical care that we provide at Bethesda is at no charge, and there's no billing to your insurance or notification of your insurance. And we actually fly patients in for free to be involved in our clinical research. So this is a national resource, and I think it's a good opportunity for folks to become involved in, you know, what you're actually paying for, you know, with your tax dollars. Next slide. So this was mentioned earlier by Armin, and I think there's some important things I want to bring up. You know, there's about 250,000 new cases of prostate cancer, but still about 34,000 deaths estimated in this year. And about 6% of men present with metastatic prostate cancer diagnosis. That means the cancer has obviously already spread outside the prostate cancer. Unfortunately, today, although advances have been made, we're extending the life of these men by multiple years. This group is not yet curable. And that's about 15,000. But a lot of men, another 20,000 men, are told that they're cured at diagnosis, and unfortunately their cancer comes back. So there's already spread of their cancer. So when the prostate is taken out and then the PSA comes back, that means that there were some cells that got out of the prostate and could not be cured by surgery or radiation. So we think if we can impact these men who we think are curable, but the cells are out, this is what we call high-grade localized disease, or are born with a genetic risk for developing disease, we can have even a greater impact and potentially cure these men. Next slide. So again, this is a clinical trial. I'm very happy to hear that one of our patients earlier on was involved in a clinical trial. It's the only way we can make progress is by putting data together. And in this trial, what we looked at is, can we give drugs with surgery to impact how well patients do? Next slide. So this is how it works. So, you know, all men in our trial came to Bethesda, underwent an MRI of their prostate. They had a biopsy then of their prostate, of very specific lesions. Now, prostate cancer is a cancer that we call multifocal and multiclonal, which means that there are actually different cancers in your prostate at the time of diagnosis. So multiple cancers, and some of those cancers are very different, both genetically and histologically. Patients receive 6 months of intensive hormonal therapy prior to surgery. We know prostate cancer is driven by the androgen receptor, driven by male hormones, and by blocking that treatment, we thought we could potentially impact how well patients did. Patients then went to surgery, and at surgery, we developed really a 3D mold where we could track the individual lesion we saw at the same biopsy and to see how that was impacted by surgery. And our goal was, can we shrink the cancer? And was there a change in the genetics of the cancer from our treatment? Next slide. This is the patients who went on the trial. Next slide here. What you'll see is this is patients with very high risk, high grade disease. The patients were relatively young, they were 61. We had about 15% African Americans, but many of these patients had T4 disease, which is extensive disease, and about a quarter of them already had cancer that had spread to lymph nodes, and many of them had the highest grade of prostate cancer, Gleason 9 and Gleason 10. Next slide. Next slide. So this is a picture of an MRI of a very large tumor in the prostate. You know, most of the time when we see prostate cancer tumors on the MRI, they'll only maybe be a centimeter or so. This was almost 4 centimeters in the prostate, which you can see by the arrow is the full length of it. Now, not only do we do pictures of the prostate, but we see how well there's diffusion of prostate cancer. When there are more cancer cells there, we see more diffusion of water to the prostate cancer, and that's what some of these other images is. After the 6 months of treatment, the tumor did get smaller, not as small as we would have liked it. This is one example, and the prostate got smaller. Next slide. So what we have found from our work and others, if you can almost eliminate all the prostate cancer with the drugs, so what we call an exceptional responder, the chance of your prostate coming back is much, much smaller, you know, nearing zero, not quite zero. And you can see in the 2 pictures earlier on, you know, you can see the high density of cells, the high color, and then after the treatment, there's almost no cancer left, a few cells. So in some patients, we had dramatic shrinkage and really essentially near elimination of the cancer. Next slide. And we also found out that if you had a lot of cancer at your first MRI, you were much more likely to have no cancer afterwards. So this is what some of the people have been talking about earlier on. We see patients early on with small amounts of cancer that was highly predictive of having no cancer. And again, that's predictive of having a very good response afterwards. Next slide. And we found that certain biologic markers were actually important, and that's why the science is so important. We found these markers called P10 or ERG fusion. If you had those, particularly both of those, despite the size of your cancer, despite what we thought would work, your cancer was much more likely to still be present afterwards. And that's what this INR is called, an incomplete response. If you didn't have those, you were much more likely to have a complete resolution, exceptional response to your tumor. So looking at the biology of your cancer is real important, not just the size. Next slide. So, but I think this is an important factor. You know, you have different prostate cancers in your prostate biopsies. Here's one patient. This is one of the multiple biopsies you have. Right next to each other, you see 2 different looking cancers. You can see the pictures. And you know, our questions, would they be different pathology? Would they have different imaging? Are genomics different? And should we treat them differently? Next slide. And this is patients that after they received their 6 months. Again, if you look at the top slides and the bottom slide, even cancers that are very close to it, get to each other on the prostatectomy specimens, they look very different. So again, so this is why there's probably not a silver bullet for prostate cancer, because we have different prostate cancers actually in our prostates. And then the responses to treatment actually are very different. Next slide. So here's one particular patient. This was a young man whose PSA was actually around 10. And if you look at the image, you can see basically on the left side, which is labeled the B1, on the right side on the MRI, you can see the different arrows. You can see his tumors on the in the picture. And if you look at basically, you can see the very difference on our staining, the B1 versus the B2 versus B3. Again, different looking tumors. And the B2 versus 3 is actually what we call intraductal, a particularly different tumor to treat. Next slide. Now, after his treatment, you can see one of the tumors essentially went away and the other tumor got much smaller. When we did our staining, even the one we thought went away, there were a few cells left, but afterwards, again, we still saw tumor cells remaining, and tumor cells that stain differently and look differently. Next slide. Now, this is a little complicated, but basically what the message is that our one patient after our treatment really had 4 independent tumors in his prostatectomy specimen. One tumor was totally gone. One tumor was almost gone. A third tumor, actually, we uncovered another mutation, a very bad mutation. And then a 4th tumor was decreased and gone. So, you know, this is why it was so important. These particular patients were involved in our clinical trials. We learned so much about their cancer, and this is really important as we go forward and study this disease. Next slide. So how do we put all this information together? You know, one thing we're doing in the intramural program is we're spending a lot of time and resources on artificial intelligence. You know, we saw just in those few patients, some that had multiple positive biopsies, that there's a tremendous amount of genomic information and other information. So we've really put together this resource looking at where we have scientists, we have data scientists, computer programmers, and technicians, clinicians, to get an understanding of understanding individual prostate tumors. Next slide. And again, this is again how we're doing it. First, you start with a very skilled radiologist. They can go ahead, you know, draw around the prostate by hand, and then over time we learn where the images itself can actually differentiate the different parts of the prostate and differentiate where the tumor is. The next slide. And what we've actually learned using this artificial intelligence information is we can now actually track really different morphologies. And I think this is really important. You know, we're very fortunate to be at the National Cancer Institute. We have some of the best pathologists and imaging folks in the world. But, you know, there are a lot of hospitals around the country and around the world that could really utilize, you know, this technology in a way that really would bring back this data to patients everywhere. Next slide. So from the first part, you know, it's important if you have less cancer in the beginning, you're less likely to have cancer at the time of surgery. And with drugs beforehand, we potentially can eliminate that cancer. You still need the surgery, but your outcome is much better. It's really also important to know that everyone's prostate has multiple different tumors, and they're very different by histology, which is the way to look under the microscope, and genomics. And that different cancers, if you think are lethal at diagnosis, actually respond very differently to therapies, which we think would be effective for all of them. So this is treating somebody with prostate cancer, and this is really important research. The next slide. Now, how about finding men before they have prostate cancer? So something else we're studying, and this is done with outside institutions, including University of Washington, Bucket Jefferson, and also University of Michigan, where we're studying men we think are born with high genetic risk of prostate cancer and screening them with PSA and MRI, even at very low PSAs. Next slide. So basically, we know there are certain mutations, including the breast cancer gene, the BRCA gene. If men have the BRCA gene, BRCA2, for example, they're much more likely to have a more aggressive prostate cancer and likely to have prostate cancer. And multiple other tumor types. There's Lynch syndrome, ATM, CHEK2. People are born with these mutations, and we know they're more likely to get prostate cancer. Next slide. So basically, what we're doing is we're asking them to come to Bethesda. They need to have a PSA less than 2 and already have known genetic abnormalities, germline they were born with, and we screen them with MRI. We do an MRI screening every 2 years, and we do a PSA every year. And we see something abnormal on the MRI or the PSA goes up, we do a biopsy. Next slide. Patients are from all around the country. And, this is a nice thing. We're flying them in, often from genetic counselors. You can see from, Florida, New England, and the West Coast. So again, we are a national resource, and we want to be thought of as a place where people can come, not just in the local DC area. Next slide. So what have we seen so far? So basically, let's go to the next slide, actually. So basically, we've actually already enrolled about 141 patients in about a year and a half. The median age of these men are 47. Remember, they don't have prostate cancer yet. And most of them had genetic testing when they're in the only 43. To date, they've been largely Caucasian. And I think that's something we would definitely like to improve upon. And you can see the mutations below. Most of the men have the breast cancer gene, BRCA2 or BRCA1, but other mutations we've seen too. So these are men that don't have prostate cancer, that have a different cancer, but have then come to Bethesda to look for to screen their prostate. Next slide. And of the men so far, the first 138, about a quarter, we've seen an indication already for biopsy. Again, these are men that never would have been biopsied before. Oftentimes it's before indications on their MRI, sometimes because their PSA is above 2, which is our cutoff on this trial. We've performed thus far about 29 biopsies, and of those, about a third actually have shown cancer. Next slide. This is a little hard to see, but this is the cancer we've seen. By and large, it's been very early stage cancer. Some of the men we can do active surveillance and are following them with MRIs and PSAs afterwards, but some of the men we've actually have gone on to surgery. Next slide. And here's an example of one of the patients went on for surgery. He's a 55-year-old male of German and Italian descent, not Ashkenazi background, but had genetic testing at age 39 and had the breast cancer gene, the BRCA2 gene, because of a family history. Next slide. This is again his family history. So there was lots of cancer in his family. That's why he was screened. For prostate cancer, men with a diagnosis, we actually recommend genetic screening for anyone with sort of a high-grade cancer, or with anyone who has breast or ovarian cancer in their family. Next slide. So he had a very low PSA. PSA was only 1.68. He had sort of a normal exam, but I'll show you his MRI in the next slide. And you can see, it doesn't always come out with the red circle on it, but you can see the very dark lesion again on the corner that was picked up on MRI alone. And then this area was called a PIRADS4, was called moderately likely having prostate cancer, and this led to a biopsy. Next slide. So the biopsy found a very, very small amount of cancer, and this was a cancer with a lowest grade group, only 2 millimeters of cancer. And so there was a lot of discussion about whether this should just be followed with active surveillance, or because of the known greater risk for BRCA2 patients to go ahead, progress to a more aggressive prostate cancer, should he go for surgery. Now the patient, because of his family history, opted for surgery, and we'll go on to the next slide. At the surgery, we found something very different. So the surgery, this is a much more aggressive prostate cancer. It's a much higher Gleason score. This is one with high metastatic potential. And you can see it looks very different on the prostatectomy slide than it did on the very small biopsy slide. The patient had his prostate removed. He's doing very well clinically. And again, this is only one case, but again, this is somebody who never would have had any workup at all based on his PSA if it wasn't for his known BRCA mutation in his screening. Next slide. So conclusions, we don't yet have evidence-based strategies to screen men that are high risk. We're trying to get information about this. Can we follow them? Can we get outside genomics? And outside of the BRCA2 gene, which we know is the one that's probably the most common and the one that's probably the most aggressive, there's some uncertainty about the ones we're testing. We've really done sort of a wide breadth of tumors. MRIs pick up tumors early in those populations, but we don't want to overtreat. So we have some concerns about that. And our trial begins to gather useful information. We are really grateful to the subjects of the trial because without them, we would not really be able to make any meaningful progress. So next slide. So these are the people all who do all the work, as I say. I just showed the acknowledgement up here. It'll be on the video, so I want to thank them. And I think we'll go ahead and next slide. And I'll happy to answer questions sort of either now, or we can go ahead and do those, at the end of the talk. I'll leave that up to the moderator. So thank you.
Yeah, let's hold off on the questions until later. So I just want to encourage people, like we've already started to get quite a few questions in the Q&A and in the chat. If you could please send them into the Q&A. We've got somebody monitoring that, and we'll collate them, and we'll have hopefully a very robust discussion with all of our panelists and your questions afterwards. Dr. Dahut, thank you so much. That was just, as you were talking about the first part, I was thinking, well, what about people who don't have prostate cancer yet? So yeah, I'm glad you got to that, and I've got questions for you, and I know other people do as well. Let me introduce our last speaker, who's Missy Peters. And you can see her on your screen. She's young. She's a young mom. She's in her 30s. And you might wonder, what is she speaking on a panel about breast cancer? You know, a lot of people think, well, young women don't get breast cancer, right? Well, as you're going to hear from Missy herself, most people are wrong. Young women actually do get breast cancer, and it's something that there's a lot of bias in the medical community about that, and there's a lot of obstacles. And Missy has a wonderful story, and she's going to tell us her story, and then and she'll also tell us about the work that she's doing to bring this issue to light. Missy, thanks for joining us. You're on mute. Don't want to miss a word.
Thank you, Armin. And I've drafted a letter to be as powerful with my time as I can be. So thank you in advance for your ears and letting me read it to you. Good morning. My name is Missy Peters, and 2.5 years ago, I was finally diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 34. I say finally because it took 11 months to get diagnosed. In fact, I carried my first and only baby full term during this time. I was under the care of a primary care physician, an OBGYN, and a radiologist who all overlooked my lump and reassured me that at 33, then 34, that I was too young for breast cancer and that my lump was benign. I've blamed myself and felt stupid in the years since my diagnosis. I internalized this delay as my fault. And frankly, I'm convinced that's exactly how our healthcare system is designed to work. The young woman must advocate for herself. I'll get to that more in a moment. You see, I had no family history of breast cancer and was under the impression that I was not at risk due to my age. Mammogram campaigns and pink ribbons seem to synonymously start with turning 40. What I can tell you is I've checked the boxes for ovarian cancer and pancreatic cancer on every medical history form I filled out to establish care with new physicians for years, including the OBGYN and PCP who overlooked my lump. It turns out these were red flags that I may carry the BRCA gene mutation that would elevate my risk of cancer to 80%. And I was not average risk. But as far as I'm concerned, no one ever looked at my medical history forms because I found out I carried BRCA1 gene mutation a week after giving birth to my daughter and a week and a half after my cancer diagnosis. My maternity leave turned into my extended short-term disability leave from work. I went from delivering a baby into clinically induced menopause within 2 weeks. Hey, here's a silver lining. Dads can feed formula-fed babies so moms in chemo can get sleep. My life was flipped and the anger towards our medical system was slowly surfacing. How did I go through the cracks? How did it take 11 months to get diagnosed? Why was I reassured I had nothing to worry about and that I was too young? Why didn't my OBGYN never touch my boobs? Isn't that her job? Sadly, I've learned that it's not her job. As ACOG ACS have backed off of clinical and breast self-exams, they unfortunately, in my strong opinion, have not backfilled the conversation with anything. I've done my research. In July of 2017, ACOG released a bulletin updating former guidelines to endorse breast awareness instead of clinical and self-exams. They wrote, and I quote, "Women should be educated about the signs and symptoms of breast cancer and advised to notify their healthcare provider if they notice a change, such as a pain, a mass, a new onset of nipple discharge, redness in their breasts," end quote. This leaves me to ask the question, who is teaching us breast awareness? It's great to write this, but if nobody is teaching us breast awareness and we no longer endorse breast exams, then who is looking out for us? My strong opinion, nobody. While in treatment and still receiving disability to heal from my bilateral mastectomies, I started the Breast Cancer Portrait Project, a 501c3 to raise awareness that young women get breast cancer too. I thought to myself, if I had just heard of one woman diagnosed with breast cancer before 40, I may have urged physicians to help me to get diagnosed sooner. I would have advocated for myself instead of trusting them because I was too young, which is exactly how our medical system is designed to work. Remember that moment I put on hold a second ago? Our medical system puts the responsibility back on the young woman, but has never educated her on breast health, signs, symptoms, and risks of breast cancer, or in ACOG's own words, breast awareness. Thus, I made it my responsibility to teach others. I never returned to work full-time. Instead, I returned part-time, and I started working for free, photographing and sharing stories of women in the breast cancer community. I wish I could say that they are all survivors, but a number of stories are shared in memoriam, as young women are disease more deadly and more likely to be diagnosed at later stages than in women over 40. In fact, 50% of the women I have randomly photographed for the Breast Cancer Portrait Project had delayed diagnoses. I will repeat that. 50% of the women I have photographed for the Breast Cancer Portrait Project have delayed diagnoses. This is congruent with Ruddy et al.'s data from 2009, presented at ASCO and cited in the early act. When I looked more closely at my data to see how so many young women could slip through the cracks, I saw obvious trends. I saw that approximately 1/3 of these women had delayed diagnoses because they did not feel that they were at risk and that they were too young, so they did not go to the doctor. Another 1/3 of these women were sent home after going to the doctor, reassured that they were too young. And in the final group of women with delayed diagnoses, an alarming 1/3 of these women dismissed by their radiologists after ultrasound, being reassured that they had a fibroadenoma or a benign mass, just like me. Here's another fact. 50% of us have no family history of breast cancer, and we were considered average risk. This is all kind of scary, isn't it? And I'm sure many of you have daughters and granddaughters that you would like to share this information with. Which brings me to this food for thought. If we know young women are routinely delayed in diagnoses, which they are, then why aren't our physicians holding their word of teaching us breast awareness? Or are they relying on nonprofits such as my own to do so? If so, where's the PSA and funding to support us? Or is that my job too? A high school girl is memorialized in the Breast Cancer Portrait Project through her older sister who shared her story. Andy passed away at 16 years old of metastatic disease. She had no family history of breast cancer. Andy concealed her red and inflamed breast, even stuffed her sports bra with tissues to collect her nipple discharge and hide her weird boob from her volleyball teammates in the locker room. By the time Andy's mom accidentally saw her changing and rushed her through a diagnosis, it was too late. She passed away that year. Young women, and frankly, women of all ages, deserve to know the signs, symptoms, and risks of breast cancer. No physician should ever tell a woman that she is too young for this disease, because although she is just their patient, she is somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, somebody's mother, and her life is very important to them. Today, 3.5 years after finding my lump, my anger and sadness for the reality that young women face has resurfaced. On Friday, my gynecologic oncologist told me that I may not be able to have another child. He will give me until December to see if my ovaries come back from the barren dryness that is ovarian suppression. But every year that passes, my risk of ovarian cancer increases as I age closer to 40 because I carry the BRCA1 gene mutation. And I find myself thinking of all of those doctors I saw prior to my diagnosis, never raised the alarm that I might be BRCA1 positive. Do they even read our medical history forms we fill out in their waiting rooms? If they had, my cancer could have been avoided altogether, and I could have been offered prophylactic surgeries. I think of the primary care physician who told me I just have lumpy breasts. I think of the OBGYN I saw repeatedly through my pregnancy who never touched my boobs. And I think of the radiologist who told me he was 95% confident my lump was a benign fibroadenoma and that he was not worried. What was his name? Should I look it up and write him a letter? Should I tell him that he delayed my diagnosis by 11 months by providing me false assurance? Would that have given my ovaries 11 more months to potentially come back to life and offer my daughter a sibling? What about the fact that roughly 1 in 3 of us who are currently cancer-free will be told again that we have cancer? Except this time, it will have spread through our body, we will die from it, because this is metastatic disease. I understand that I may not be able to make her a sister, but now I ask the question, how do those 11 months that I lost affect my future? Because now this radiologist has affected whether my daughter will have a mother. But this radiologist and none of these doctors have any idea who I am, and how they have affected my life and my family's life, because that's the way our medical system works, and I was supposed to advocate for myself. I thank you for the opportunity to speak this October Eve. The young breast cancer community and the Breast Cancer Portrait Project firmly believe that our collection of stories and anecdotal data shed light on the many necessary improvements that can be made to our medical system to protect our sisters and our daughters. We simply want our voices to be heard, and we ask for those with power to hear us. Thank you.
Wow, Missy, thank you so much. That was just terrific. It really emphasizes the fact that young women need to be screened and need to be paying attention to what's going on and advocate for themselves. But also, just as we're talking about the similarities between breast cancer and prostate cancer, that young men also need to be doing testicular self-exams, which is something that they often don't do, and that young men, particularly young African-American men, need to be screened for prostate cancer. But you've got a presentation that will introduce us to some of the women that you've profiled in the Breast Cancer Portrait Project, and please go ahead and do that. It's give us even more powerful messaging on this topic.
Yes, thank you again for the opportunity. If you can see my screen here. So I appreciate the opportunity to have a few more moments to highlight through the photographs collected by myself as the photographer of the Breast Cancer Portrait Project that my situation was not an isolated event at all. As I said, 50% of us have delayed diagnoses. And I thought with the remaining time that I had, I could paint a larger picture of who we are and what our stories are and the many different ways that we have slipped through the cracks as 50% of us have delayed diagnoses. So as I mentioned, it's broken up into thirds as far as my data is concerned. And I have divided this section of the presentation into those categories. So these are some of our stories. The first category is women who were not concerned enough because they did not feel they were at risk, so they did not go to the doctor. And as I mentioned, Andy, this is Andy, and this is her sister Lauren holding her photo. Andy was 16 years old and a high school sophomore, and she was hiding her red and inflamed breast and even stuffing her sports bra. And by the time Andy was diagnosed, it was stage 4 novo, and she passed away later that year. No family history of breast cancer, mind you. This is Louisa. Louisa's a teacher. Louisa has strong family history of ovarian cancer strong indication that she might be a BRCA gene carrier. And Louisa had grandma and great grandma die of ovarian cancer in their 30s. She went to her doctor and asked for genetic testing in her 20s. And her doctor told her that she did not qualify for genetic testing and would likely have to pay out of pocket for it. She did not get genetic testing. She later on, while she was pregnant, found a lump and assumed it was because she was pregnant and the changes she was going through with her hormones, and even thought it was because of her milk coming in while she was pregnant. That does not happen. It took 7 months for Louisa to get diagnosed. And of course, she was 32 weeks at the time of her diagnosis, and she was BRCA positive. She, like me, could have been diagnosed prior to even getting cancer. These are stories of women who went to the doctor and were turned away, reassured that they were too young and no diagnostics were ordered. This is Latricia. Latricia was diagnosed at 34 years old. Latricia recounts how she went to the doctor and her doctor told her that she was too young and it was likely a cyst, although Latricia will tell you her doctor never even touched her breast. She went home, sat on that for a few months, and then later on went back to the doctor, still concerned, advocating for herself, requesting a referral to the breast clinic. When her doctor finally agreed to send her the referral, her diagnosis was delayed 6 months. This is Stephanie. Stephanie was diagnosed at 33 years old. Stephanie's doctor advised that she should have a psych eval and be prescribed antidepressants, and even mentioned to her that she was likely a lonely military spouse while her husband at the time was deployed. Stephanie had to return 4 times to her doctor to be ordered imaging. At that time, she was finally diagnosed with breast cancer with a delayed diagnosis of 7 months. Absolutely demeaning and horrible to be offered antidepressants for repeatedly going to the doctor for a breast lump. Patricia was 27 years old at the time of her diagnosis. Patricia is an ICU nurse, and when she went to her OBGYN, both she, educated on breast health as a nurse, and her OBGYN thought it was a good sign that she had tenderness and it was likely a cyst. Side note, that's a common misnomer of the many, many stories I have collected through the Breast Cancer Portrait Project. It can present as an ache, it can present as nothing, it can present as a sharp pain. So it was, although a reassurance to them that it was likely a cyst, it was cancer. And it took Patricia 10 months to get diagnosed. She later went to her primary care physician, who immediately was concerned and ordered imaging. These next stories are of women who were misdiagnosed, like me, after going to their doctor and being ordered ultrasound. And all of these women were denied by their radiologist biopsies. Mimi is a mammography technician, and Mimi was eventually diagnosed at 37 years old after an entire year after finding her month of a delayed diagnosis. Mimi asked her radiologist that she works with to look at her lump, and her radiologist told her that she wasn't concerned. She was young, it was likely benign. This is Alexis, diagnosed at 28 years old. Alexis repeatedly went to the doctor about a breast lump, first reassured that it was related to her menstrual cycle. It never went away. Alexis later returned her own accord, requesting imaging. The radiologist determined it was a benign fibroadenoma, just like me, just like Mimi, and went home again. And then Alexis eventually went back, still concerned about her lump, finally diagnosed with cancer 18 months after finding her lump. And this is the last story that I will be sharing today. It is of Jen, in memoriam, shared to her daughter, Maya. Jen was 31 years old when she found a dense area in her breasts. Dense area is a common characteristic of invasive lobular carcinoma, a harder cancer to detect. And she should have immediately been sent for a biopsy because it routinely is not identified due to the nature of it growing in long strands, not in a formal lump. But her doctor felt that she was too young, and Jen left a beautiful blog to share her story in her own words that I pulled this information from. So Jen's OB told her that they'll monitor the dense area, did not do anything. Jen later returned pregnant to the same OB, requesting that attention be drawn to the dense area of her breast because she knew something wasn't right. Her OB sent her for ultrasound, which naturally didn't pick anything up because it was invasive lobular carcinoma, and then suggested, because she was recently pregnant, that they wait until her second trimester to biopsy the area. It was at that time that Jen was eventually diagnosed. I think she went in for mastectomy that following week or 2 weeks later, and they determined through pathology that her cancer was 15 centimeters in length, and she had 22 positive lymph nodes already. Jen's cancer returned metastatic a few years later. And of course, she is not with us today. So all of these stories, all of them, and this is just a small sampling of the 50% of the women in over 70 stories that I've collected, nearing 100, as I have many women lined up in October to photograph, that so many of us were denied the proper attention from our doctors. And if I have anyone's attention today, I do ask that our voices be heard, and I would love the opportunity to continue this conversation, as although you might sense some frustration in my voice, I really am eager to have a conversation with those who can help us and to help answer the question of who is teaching us breast awareness.
Well, Missy, thank you so much. Just before, in case nobody gets this, it's you can find out more information about Missy's work at breastcancerportraitproject.org or on Instagram at breastcancerportraitproject. Let me just jump into some of the questions. We've got a whole bunch of questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. I think we're supposed to be stopping at 12:15 Eastern time, 9:15 on the West Coast, for those of us who happen to be on the West Coast. But we'll go on a little bit longer if our speakers are able to stick around for a little bit, so another 5-10 minutes after that. But I wanted to start with a question to Patrick and Hollywood. Both of you could talk about the self-advocacy part of it. Both of you talked about taking charge, and you both also talked about the family support. And Hollywood, you were talking about relying on the wife. I think it's so important to have strong family support, but it's also so important that you really not completely rely on other people, that you take charge of this thing yourself. And would you both of you talk a little bit about that for just briefly, so we can get to a lot of our other questions?
Yeah. So Missy, thank you. That was super awesome. And it reminded me of a friend of mine with prostate cancer who's in his early 40s, and this sort of similar story happened where he went to his GP and his PSA was over 100, and he was told, it's just, you're too young to have prostate cancer. It's literally not that, it's something else. So he gave him some medication for infection, and went back 3 months later, exact same thing, did and repeated the process. The bottom line, long story short, is he's stage 4 prostate cancer. And I bring it up because that's, to answer your question, that's the advocacy part. Right? Don't listen to doctors just because they're doctors necessarily, right? Infuse that with your own instinct, your own knowledge, your own new research, and really assume that whatever you're learning is not necessarily correct until you've verified it. So again, Missy, I really appreciate that and all you're doing. And I love what you read. But yeah, the advocacy is obviously super important in every type of cancer, from the point that you may be diagnosed or misdiagnosed all the way through treatment. It's paramount.
Yeah. What about you, Hollywood? What did you took charge, but you also were relying on your wife?
Yes. First, I want to say, Dr. Wheat, man, thank you. I've heard things from Dr. William today I've never heard. I will look at this over and over and over and over again. Missy, God love you, so do I. Keep fighting, baby. Keep fighting. Man, I'm tearing up because of Missy and Doc. But we got to take control. And me, when I go to the doctor, it's like I got tunnel vision. I don't hear nothing. I really don't. So I have to have somebody with me, y'all, because I just get lost. I mean, as soon as I leave the doctor's office, I don't remember nothing half he said. So I have to have somebody with me. And I have, you know, and when I said my wife, but I got some daughters, and I got one daughter, she take notes, and man, you know, you got to have them positive people around you. But man, I'm telling you, God brought all of y'all in my life today. And that Dr. William, man, oh man, you were super great. And Miss, I hate you went through this, but it was for a reason also, baby. But men, ladies, let's take control and help fix this. All these stories we can't keep them within ourselves. We got to tell them, y'all. We got to tell them. I mean, it's, oh man, you know, I guess there's some people looking at me now, all this biker crying, this tear. Hey man, I'm just that kind of guy, you know, but we have to take control. But I want to say this. I had some bad experience in my surgeries too, y'all. And I had a bad leakage problem. And I wasn't riding my motorcycle. I wouldn't go off to work. I wouldn't do nothing. I just sit in that house. And my wife walked in that house with 2 bags. And in that bag was the pins. And told me to now get out of this house. That's the, you know, but I got the leakage fixed, you know, through another doctor, which I have inside of me called a sphincter. And I'm pretty sure Dr. William, y'all know what I'm talking about. I have a sphincter. And I think I'm close to my time to go get it checked again because it's weakening up. So, but
yeah.
Hey man, I you know, it's been an experience. Is, you know, that it cannot be even, you can't really even describe it all the way. You just have to deal with it. Yeah. But you got to have people in your corner.
Yep.
I don't think it's good for nobody to go through this by themselves. I really don't. I just can't see it. You know, I just can't see nobody going through this by themselves.
Yeah, Dr. Dahut.
Huh?
I was just wanted to ask Dr. Dahut a question as well. I think we'll try to come back to you, Hollywood. Dr. Dahut, a couple questions came in that were more on the medical side of things, and one had to do with whether there's any kind of a connection between prostate cancer and previous experience with HPV infections. And then as you were talking, I was just thinking about this book that I just read, which is a biography of Jennifer Doudna, who's one of the developers of CRISPR and won a Nobel Prize for that recently. And whether there's any gene therapy kinds of things or diagnostics or specific treatments that can target those various prostate cancers that you were talking about and just kill them where they are so we can avoid the type of metastatic cancer you were talking about.
So the first question on HPV, there was a publication that came out within the last few months that shows that there may be a relationship. So I think, again, you know, I think we all encourage, you know, young adults, children to go ahead and be vaccinated for HPV, for cancer prevention. You know, males as well as females need to be vaccinated. You know, it's not a proven fact, but there is at least some information that there may be a relationship. So I think that was a great question. And again, something to sort of to be aware of. You know, as far as targeted therapies, you know, prostate cancer has the androgen receptor, which is actually a great target for prostate cancer, and that's where a lot of the therapies have been looking at. But once the cancer has come back after hormonal therapy, which is how you treat the androgen receptor, then I think you're right. We do need to come up with better treatments and really more targeted therapies, and whether that'll be with genomics or what we call expression profiles. But we and others were doing a large institutional trial where we're following men with rare genetic abnormalities who have advanced cancer to try to learn a little bit more about how they respond to therapies. And that's exactly what we'd hope to do, is to come up with much more precision treatments, whether it's gene therapies or whether it's targeted therapies or some of the new cellular therapies. So I think those are great questions. So thank you.
While I've got you here, there's just a couple more questions that just came in, and I actually was thinking one of them you mentioned, I think, in one of the trials that you had 15% African Americans, which is just a touch over the proportion in the general population, but because Black men are disproportionately represented among advanced cases, and part of that has to do with getting diagnosed later. But are you doing specific things to do outreach to African Americans and other minorities?
That's really a great question. So it's African Americans are more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer and are more likely to die from prostate cancer. But when African Americans have equal access to care and are treated stage for stage the same, oftentimes they actually do a little better. But the biology of the cancer is different. So there's different things we think about, where outcomes, who lives longer, who's more likely to get cancer, and the biology, the genetics of the cancer appear to be different in men who self-declare themselves as African American. And again, stage for stage with equal access of care, the outcomes are actually maybe even a little bit better. We have actually put together recently at the Center for Cancer Research, which is the intramural part of the NCI, a working group to really focus on our outreach efforts. We actually had some of our meetings earlier today. We have someone who was formerly on the faculty at Howard University who did outreach. We've put together social workers, we've put together nurse navigators to see what we can do as far as forming partnerships with other institutions or the organizations to increase the percentage of those from underrepresented groups on our trials. Because we may think we know what the barriers are, maybe historical issues, it may be financial issues, it may be education, but we need more information, and we really want to be able to do this better. As I mentioned earlier, we don't charge our patients. We can bring patients in without a cost. So there's really no excuse for us not having really a wide and diverse patient population. So that's a great question. It's something we obviously need to do better on.
Missy, I've got a question for you, if you're still there. A couple of questions, actually, two things. One, as we talked about on the phone the other day, had a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad you were able to do that. But and you talked about this in your letter, the difference between breast awareness and self-exams, and how the task forces that have been out there that we can talk about in some detail later on, it's too detailed to get into right now, have recommended actually against standard preventive breast exams. And so talk about that when dealing with trying to help women diagnose themselves without when they're being told that they shouldn't actually do a breast self-exam.
Yeah, Armin, thank you again for the opportunity to speak to that point, because it is an incredible point of contention within the young survivor community, and I feel confident to say the breast community at large. But I've read the research myself, and I understand why ACS and ACOG have backed off of breast self-exams, as the study shows, the peer-reviewed research shows that mortality rates did not decrease for women who were educated to perform breast self-exams. So in my own words, to paraphrase, we as our institutions, ACOG, ACS, et cetera, found that why should we invest in these campaigns if it didn't even reduce mortality rates? Moving on from that, as I said in my letter, and would love to put in own words again right now to draw greater attention to it, that they, in backing off of breast self-exams and clinical breast exams, forward their 2017 bulletin that they now endorse breast awareness. Just like me, I found my lump accidentally. I was shaving my armpit in the shower and my lump was right here, found it accidentally. Breast awareness would be, if you know what your body usually feels like, then you know if a new lump appears or know if a dense area appears because it's part of your body and you should know your body. So the nuances to that conversation are, it takes putting your hands on your body to know what your body feels like, to know you're normal, and to know if something changes. They don't call that a self-exam anymore because it didn't reduce mortality rates. They simply refer to that in the nuanced dialogue, as I said, as breast awareness. But nobody is teaching us breast awareness. And instead, as you saw highlighted in all of my stories, 50% of us have delayed diagnoses because we don't even know that that dense area should have been a huge alarm, that that woman, Jen, should have insisted on a biopsy because we're doctors. And it's really hard to go against doctors. So one, sure, let's define whether it's physicians, whether it's teachers in our schools as part of sex ed programs, or we relying on the private sector to teach breast awareness. Somebody has to be teaching our young population breast awareness because we're too young for mammograms. And I know that the next question is going to be, well, should we be advocating for mammograms to start earlier? And in speaking with my own oncologist and reading the data myself, unfortunately, that's not the push that we're asking for, because so many of us have dense breasts and mammograms are unreliable, that we really do rely on a woman using her own hands, fingers, and eyes to touch her body. We just need to know what that means and what to do with that information. And unfortunately, we need to know when we need to get out of a doctor's office and go to another doctor's office who can actually help us, because so many physicians view us as too young. And I'll use my own words to say, I've seen it written, and even in the 2017 bulletin from ACOG, unfortunately, physicians believe we're clogging their offices by being concerned about the lumps that we're finding.
Wow. All right, this is probably our last question. I wanted to also ask you, because the other speakers, in particular Hollywood and Pat, talked about the importance of family support and support from others. How important was that to you to get family support? You're a young pregnant mother when you were diagnosed, and also the women who were diagnosed, some of whom did not survive, but how important is family or other support to them dealing with a much more severe diagnosis?
Well, I'll answer it in this way. You can't bring babies into chemo rooms. So infusion centers don't allow children. And if I wanted to have my husband by my side, I needed to have friends and family watching my infant so I could go get chemo. That's one part of it. Surgeries, I couldn't lift my daughter for a month after my breast surgeries. I had to have mastectomies with direct to expander. And then a few months later, I had to have another surgery as I chose to have reconstruction to have implants put in. And I could not lift my baby. So that's the physical aspect of having family, loved ones, friends at your doorstep to help you with your children. I frequently have interviewed young moms or mothers of young children, and I don't know what's worse, having an infant at home or having a toddler and a 4-year-old running around, or a child that you're trying to drop off at school through all of this. So really, my heart goes out to women of any age, but if your child is at college or is even older, for most women who have breast cancer and their children are grown, that's a totally different state than for the young mom and the young women who are dealing with this, and they are the care providers for the young people in their family. And not to mention the strain it put on my husband to take care of everything that I was not able to on our home front.
Well, once again, I want to thank all of our panelists, starting with Congressman Donald Payne, Patrick Scheffler, Reginald Hollywood Thompson, Dr. William Dahut, and of course, Missy Peters, and the many organizations that helped put this together, the Congressional Men's Health Caucus, Men's Health Network, of course, National Cancer Institute, CDC, American Urological Association, the Breast Cancer Portrait Project, Fans for the Cure, Healthy Women, and Zero, the End of Prostate Cancer. As I mentioned earlier at the very beginning, there's a link to the speaker bios and organization websites and other resources in the chat at the very top of the chat, or if you're on YouTube listening to this or watching this. in the description. And please share this link widely so we can get this information out to as many people as possible. As you learned a lot, I learned a tremendous amount today too, and there's information that a lot of other people need to know. There are also a lot of resources at menshealthnetwork.org about breast cancer, about prostate cancer, especially, and other men's health issues. And again, thank you very much. And want to remind everybody, when you're out, wear a mask and get vaccinated if you haven't been. Thank you very much again.